What's up, YouTube? How y'all doing? Um, if you guys didn't know, I was homeschooled. So I saw this little short video that Jordan Peterson went over. I guess somebody asked him about homeschooling. So I decided I want to react and see what he has to say about it and what the person asks, and you'll get to see what like a homeschooler thinks about what Jordan Peterson thinks about homeschooling. Blow your freaking mind. I'm telling you. All right, let's go.
I don't want my young children indoctrinated with dangerous ideas. And as time marches on, I trust public education less and less. I know that you have strong thoughts on the danger of the devouring Oedipal mother who harms her child by protecting them.
Overprotection, never a good thing. I agree.
And that's certainly not what I aspire to. I wonder if, in spite of your idea that kids need to become tough and learn to slay dragons, if you have anything good to say about the idea of homeschooling.
Well, I don't have anything bad to say about it. I do know that the Quebec government has recently taken moves to make it much more difficult for people to homeschool their children. And it's not like 5 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have presumed that the vast majority of people who were homeschooling their children were to be viewed with skepticism initially. I'm not so sure about that anymore.
Yeah, see, I think my parents were way ahead of the curve, dude. They knew how bad the public school systems were getting and how they weren't really educating people well. And they were also lying to them about, a lot of things in life, or they felt were lying. Now, maybe they weren't lying about everything, right? Obviously, some of it fell into religious beliefs that my parents have. But I do believe that all of us kids, got a great education, have a strong basis behind like reading, writing, arithmetic, like math, good social comprehension skills. Like I think the biggest misconception people have with homeschooling is that the kids are just like at home all day, every day, and never go and do anything with anybody else. And so they like lack like socialization and they are completely sheltered from the real world. I think every parent to an extent will shelter their kids from a lot of things that maybe it would be better if they just were exposed to and realize that, there is a lot of danger and things in life that are out of your control and you have to be very careful. And it's probably better to try and teach them that and then let them experience it also so they can understand where you're coming from instead of just seeing it as a rule that was given to them that they must follow. But I mean, all my sisters graduated from college with extremely good GPAs. Passed their classes, are fairly successful. They're not failures. They're successful in the things that they do. They're smart, intellectual. We don't always agree on things, obviously, as brothers and sisters generally don't, or sisters to sisters. It's just siblings in general. Come on, dude. People go so many different directions. It's hard to stay on the same page with people, and especially nowadays with the crazy like dividing and trying to like make all these subgroups to like say that if you believe this you can't believe that, and polarizing everybody into different like areas on a topic. It's just crazy. It's hard to get along and not argue with people, and especially for siblings because you see too much of them, or did in the past. Now, honestly, I see them far less because we live so far away from each other. It's hard to keep in contact and make our schedules work together.
Um,
But I definitely don't think it's a bad thing.
For example, I was sent a poster today. Someone sent me this link that they found in a local junior high school, and one of the media pieces that were recommended on this poster was a movie called Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Now, I thought that was a terrible movie, even though I'm perfectly capable of enjoying bizarre movies. But so it's a bizarre movie, that's for sure, but I also thought it was a terrible, bitter movie. Terrible and bitter. Those are separate. A movie can be bitter and be quite great, but it was a terrible movie and it was a bitter movie. But I can tell you one bloody thing about that movie. It's not required viewing for 12-year-old kids. That's for sure. So I think you have increasing reason to be skeptical of the public education system. I also looked at the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario's guidelines for education from kindergarten to grade 8, and what that is in essence, and I think I will do a video about it in the relatively near future, is a blueprint for transforming children into social justice warriors. It basically says that. It's like you don't have to be a conspiracy theory to read that. I mean, we have social justice tribunals in Ontario. And so the idea is, well,
And thank God I don't live in Canada.
Children, if you're going to get people to, what would you say, favor equity properly, well, then you better start teaching them while they're young. It's like,
Yeah, it's the concept of brainwashing and indoctrination. Every human being, in some way, shape, or form, is being brainwashed and indoctrinated from the moment they are born. Some things are important for society, like how you should act, treat others, etc. And then some things are, more, shall we say, up for debate whether they're good or bad to teach your kids, like an extreme religious or political position. You teaching your kids does mean that there is a chance that they will believe that later on in life. Now, it doesn't always mean that. Kids are a lot smarter than you think, and especially as they get old enough, they'll start seeing the inconsistencies and things that you're telling them that don't really add up. But some kids are not like that, and I have met many kids, homeschooled or not, that just basically believed everything their parents told them, all the way until they were adults, and some of them still to this day basically just believe everything their parents have ever told them. And their parents, that's their authority figures, the people that have told them everything. They just believe that and they don't question it. And I think that happens throughout your life wherever you go, and that's why no matter what you hear from me or from somebody else, from Jordan Peterson, you should always be looking at it with a critical eye. And also, there are definitely levels to what you should be teaching somebody. So comprehension levels and being able to understand the big picture, I think it's hard to teach younger people that. And as you grow older and you experience more of life, right, you might see that bigger picture. And eventually your perspective was this, and now it's all the way here. And as you get older and older and experience more and more, you gradually, my hands have left the frame now, but you gradually, you broaden your intelligence. I think intelligence is, for a long time in your life, is constantly evolving. And even as an older person, you can constantly evolve and change and learn from your mistakes and learn from ideas that later on appear not to be true anymore after, further research is done, further things have been done to critique or look into it. So it's very interesting.
maybe not.
But there's definitely things that you shouldn't
So
be teaching
now,
your kids, I think,
you
at a
asked
young
that question
age.
properly, because you say, well, the terrible education system, the wonderful mother homeschooling, right? That's the danger. It's like, no, because it might not be the wonderful mother homeschooling. It might be the pathological mother using the pathology of the education system as an excuse to get her talons into her children, right? Because that's certainly equally possible, or perhaps even more possible.
Yeah, where you get an extremely controlling parental figure that can't let you live your own life and is constantly, you know, um, inundating you with their belief system, etc. I don't think that that's necessarily something that just happens to homeschooling. Although I think every parent is going to try and teach their kids to believe what they believe, because the reason they believe what they believe is because they wholeheartedly have decided that that's the truth to them, whether it is or not, you know? So they feel morally justified to teach you what they're teaching you because they believe it's true. Um, and it may not always be true. And that's why you have to critically think and look and evaluate and go through the emotions and do the work to sift through it all to try and understand the bigger picture and what, is trying to be conveyed to you. Um, but a lot of people, they're just like, oh, well, I don't believe this. And, my parents lied, so now I can't trust anything they say. And society's a lie. And so they don't follow any rules, and things just continue to fall apart. And then they're shocked when there's this massive moral decay. And this is coming from somebody who is not necessarily, a Christian. I was raised Christian, but I don't believe it, and yet I still do believe that there is a problem in society now where people have gone so far to one side or another that we have things like, bad things that continually are happening that are a result of people no longer having like an ideal way to live, a rule structure that they believe is right. They now it's like they don't believe in the Ten Commandments. They don't believe in the U.S. law system. They don't believe in any of it. And it's like, I do think there is discourse to be had about whether things are right or wrong. But I do think there has to be a general baseline that people believe, like, I know this is crazy to say, but I do generally believe that, like, most of the 10 commandments are something that, like, you should probably follow as a human being, because they're not there. There's nothing bad about them, like honoring your father and mother. you know Try and be respectful to your elders. Your father and mother do a lot and sacrifice a lot for you to be alive. You should honor them. Does not mean that you have to agree and be subservient and never stand up against them, but you should be honorable to them, you know? Um, and there are cases where they don't deserve that. Um, but being, not lying, not murdering people, um, not stealing, uh, these are things that, I think are good for society to follow. Um, and are conducive to having a society that can handle itself and that can work with people of all these differing kinds. And when you start saying that, like, oh, well, theft is okay at certain times, and it's okay to lie sometimes, and it's okay to murder people sometimes, like, it becomes to be, everything becomes gray, and it's very hard for people to figure out where they fall in that. And I think that's what we're going through in the United States, is where there's so many different moral questions that we're asking, because so many people are walking away from, like, the Christian faith. I think that's the primary one, because of the nature of how America was founded. There's a lot of Christians that live in America, or supposed Christians. And the westernization and materialistic ideology that has infected the church and the Christian beliefs in the West has, in many ways, even furthered the destruction of the church, because people don't really follow the teachings of the Bible anymore. They pick and choose what they want to believe from it, and they're very hypocritical. Um, and that's not just in Christianity, that's in many religions. And a lot of it is up to debate, as far as what you believe and don't believe. But it's just very interesting, to see this and say, I don't know what the answer is, whether to send your kids to public school or not. And I definitely think there is a huge chance of the parents, basically, like, forcing their beliefs into their kids to the point where the kids just feel like they have to believe because their parents do. And then when they finally realize that maybe their parents weren't telling them the truth, there's a huge like trial and tribulation period where you have to go through and figure out, like, is what they told me true? Do I believe this truth? And it can be rough.
Because at least in the public education system, there's some necessity for consensus.
Yeah.
So that's something that you have to be very aware of and work to prevent, right? And so I would say if you're going to do that, probably best not to do it on your own. And it's like you need a board of advisors or something like that, and so maybe it can't just be you, and you have to figure out, well, what is the aim? And how are you going to manage that? And what makes you think you can do it? Even if it's being done badly publicly, what makes you think you could do it better? I mean, my general advice is, and people have asked me this, in fact, I had a conversation with the guy who was tiling my backyard this morning about something his son had said to him that he was taught at school recently, which really made the tiler, who had come from a rather authoritarian country, step back on his heels and think, I'm not so sure I should be sending my kid to public school anymore, and maybe I shouldn't be living in Toronto even. But my general advice is keep an eye on your kids and discuss with them what they're learning, and help equip them with the tools to not only to articulate their own viewpoint in response to what they're being taught. Now, the problem is you might not have the time nor the ability to do that. That's no simple thing. And increase.
Yep. And I think that's one of the most valuable things that you can teach a kid is how to properly articulate their ideas and thoughts to other people. And far too much have I seen, including my personal relationships, where people refuse to have a discussion about a topic without them becoming so emotional that they can't have a logical discussion. And so they end up making it to where it's like, I don't want to listen to you because you can't even properly articulate your belief system and hear my side of it and come to some sort of agreement or not. You have to be able to argue and talk through and really get down to the meat of something. You cannot just allow the main thing you should teach your children is do not allow the beliefs of another person to offend you. See someone's belief as something that maybe you could learn something from it, and there is a possibility that they could be right. And I have a responsibility to hear their side of it and listen to them and go off of what they actually said, the evidential proof, the logical proof, and come to a decision based off of that, and not based off of what my friends think is the right thing, my family thinks. What makes sense with how the world works? What makes sense? Would this work? Could this be real? Is there a possibility it's not? And too many people fall into the trap that it is very hard to go through and figure out all these different things. And so they just hear an idea, they like a lot of it, and they just believe. I mean, I've been accused of this, where people have told me that, well, Patrick, you're just telling what you heard from somebody else, and you're just regurgitating it to me, and you don't actually believe this, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, and I've been told that I can be wishy-washy sometimes. And they say, you're not reliable. Your beliefs don't always align the same way. And if you talk to me about it in the future, you might not give me the same thing. And my answer to that, and has always will be, and it'll always remain that way. It will never change. My answer to people that say that to me is pretty damn simple. I refuse to stubbornly hold a belief for the remainder of my life that I have seen be proven wrong, or there are parts of it that are not right and do not sit right and do not logically align. And I refuse to sit and say I am just a conservative, I am just a liberal, I'm just a Christian, I'm just a, high school graduate, I graduated from college. I refuse to say that just because there's a label that people want to put on you, that you are that label. There are many beliefs that you can have in this world that fall under many different applications and ways of thinking, and you are not simply stuck to just being a conservative or whatever ideology, just being a Christian. You are a person that can use their mind and think through the ideas that are presented to you and come to an understanding of it, and also to realize when prejudice and biases are there, to critically evaluate who you are and say, am I thinking reasonably or am I not? And there are many times where later on, even if I didn't agree in the moment in an argument, that later on when I really thought about it, I said, you know what? They said this and they could be right. So maybe I should think more about this. Maybe I'm not perfectly right. Maybe I don't know what I'm saying all the time. And having that mindset to be willing to be wrong, it's the willingness to not be right, is so important. But it's also the willingness to fight with somebody that you don't believe is right. Or, people get mad at me too, which I don't do this as much anymore. I stopped doing it as I've gotten older. But there are times where I've taken the devil's advocate on something and I don't actually truly believe it. But I hear somebody speaking something and I see the things that are wrong in what they're saying and things that don't add up. And while there are many points that they make that I do generally agree with, I still take a side against them and make them argue logically through what they're saying and say, okay, like, this might not be fully what you're trying to represent. Have you thought it all the way through? And people see that as condescending, rude, that, I just am argumentative. But it's like, I want you to come to a truth that is worth believing, that is justifiable, that there is evidence and it makes sense and it adds up together over a long lifetime. And when you hear people just spouting stuff and they've not really thought about it, it's pretty infuriating to hear it and say this is who's growing up, who's going to raise children, and they aren't even willing to like truly critically think through something. Because there's a lot of things that when you really get down to it, you may or may not be able to prove. And there is a certain level of faith that you will have to take with many different things that a lot of human beings disagree on. There is a level of like faith or belief that you have to have that cannot be backed up 100% by evidence. But the evidence and what you find to be true, it has to align with what reality and the world around you is telling you naturally, not what people are saying is true. Where does it align with how human beings are, how nature is, the nature of the human and the beast and the earth around us, how things grow, how we eat, how we feast upon things, how we kill things to survive? There's so much more you have to intake to create a belief system than simply just saying like this is right or wrong. And that's where a lot of people go wrong.
Increasingly, if you're unwilling to have your children participate in what is increasingly...
And I will say that the one critique I have always had with homeschooling, and will have till the end of my day, is that many homeschoolers are so caught up in their belief systems, and it's usually Christianity, but it is not always, that they basically just indoctrinate their children into a belief system that later on in life becomes increasingly more apparent that it's probably not true, or there are large swaths of what you have taught me that is wrong. And in turn, what that does is eventually makes them doubt you and who you are as a parent. And once they work through it, they might say, hey, I get where my parents are coming from. I don't always agree with them on everything, but I do think they had good intentions for me, and you move on. But I think you do a disservice to your children when you teach them things and you don't teach them the other side of the argument, that you try to close them off from the perspective that don't want them to believe. What you need to do is represent the truth, the facts, and show your kids why something is true. Do not just tell them it is true. You must teach them why something is the way it is. And if you cannot do that, then I think you fail your children.
Indoctrination and not education, thanks
And
to
that's the main
no
problem
small
with
part
our
to the
education
Ontario
system, is
Institute
that
of Studies on Education, which is
it doesn't teach you the why. It doesn't teach you why you should believe what you should believe. Instead, it teaches you this is what is true, and it's just the truth. Even though much of what you learn in the education system is constantly evolving, changing. It's why science is a hard thing to follow as a religion, because people want to have a strict set of what they should be. And science is something that's constantly evolving. People treat it like it's a religion, like everything that they say is 100% factual and true. But in reality, science is constantly evolving, because the idea of science is to take an idea, to critically break it down, and to prove it to be true or false. And then take that idea and to continually test and make new tests and test things out and see. Anybody can be a scientist. I am a scientist. Most humans, in some way, shape, or form, especially when they're a baby, they are a scientist. They're constantly making theories and saying, I wonder what this tastes like. And they're getting all this sensory input, and they're constructing life around them and what things mean and why they like what they like and don't. All of that is by deductive reasoning and them slowly going through and experiencing it and figuring it out for themselves. You have to teach them that same level for everything in life, belief systems, etc., and do not just push them towards a belief system you want. But if you teach a kid how to logically reason through things, I think a lot of kids will find a semblance of truth that will guide them to live a good, prosperous, respectful life where they're taking care of others and themselves around them.
Institution that I particularly despise, because I think that almost all it does now is produce indoctrinators of children. It's not an easy problem to solve.
Yep.
So more power to you wanting to put your children in a situation where they're not being indoctrinated. But the alternative is very, very complicated and difficult. So, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, he kind of said, it might be a good idea, it might not be. It depends on the parents and how you look into it. If you're just afraid of your kid experiencing ideas that you don't agree with, I don't think you're going into homeschooling with the proper mentality. If you go into homeschooling with the idea that I am educated enough, I can surround them with people that are educated and can teach them to think for themselves and critically evaluate statements made by others and why it could or could not be true, you do your kid a great service. And you can make them be someone that can truly articulate and bring their beliefs and the reason why they believe something to life and help other people understand it better. But going into it with the idea that I just want my kid to be a better Christian, and so I'm going to hide them from any sexual sexualized or secular, sorry, not sexualized, but even that, hide them from sexual content so they don't even understand what being a man or a woman really is until much later in life. Hide them from secular content, which is what Christians always say, secular content, the secular world and all their beliefs that are so dangerous to our belief systems. If you hide it from them and you don't teach them why something might or might not make sense and why you should believe what you should believe, you will turn your kids into rebellious kids that will not follow what you say and will resent you for that. And it will hamper their development and growth in life, So do it with the right reasons. My parents were both college educated. My dad is a chemist and was good at math, etc. My mom graduated from college with a degree in English and history. I was taught by somebody that was a college educated person, and then my mom taught in the public school system for numerous years before she ever had kids and decided to be a stay-at-home mom once my dad made enough money to where she could. And she homeschooled us and taught us a lot of things. But she also used curriculum that was not created by herself, was created by lots of educators, etc. When we got older into say fifth, sixth onwards, we went to classes with other homeschoolers, or we went to private school classes, and we went and did, tours of things. We went to museums. We, experienced lots of differing things. And obviously, my parents taught me a lot of a lot of it was framed within a religious perspective where, I think that was something that it was like they almost tried to indoctrinate me. I love you, but, I think that's just the truth. I don't want to offend them, but I think that is the truth, is that, so even then, it's like we still got well educated, but there was a lot of things that each of us as a child had to struggle through once we were exposed to the full real world. And even when I was in high school, I had a lot of friends that were public schoolers. I hung out with the kids on the block. This was before, cell phones. So I hung out with lots of people that didn't go to church and weren't homeschooled, etc. And so I was exposed to a lot of things. But I think when I turned 18 and moved out of the house and really experienced life, it opened my eyes to a whole side of it that I didn't understand. And it took a long time for me to sift through it all and understand, where my parents were coming from, where society and people that had different beliefs were coming from. Not everybody I know did that, and they're still trapped. And I would say trapped, still, trapped in an ideology that they were taught from the moment they were born till the moment they got married, and they married somebody that was trapped in that same thing. And because of the comfort of it, they continue to believe it and follow it to this day, whether it's true or not. And that's, I don't know, maybe it is a good way to live life, but I think you have to teach your kids to critically think and not to just be a follower, to always think about everything that somebody's saying to you and evaluate it and sift through it and think about it for many days. Come back to it when you think you've come to a conclusion. Never stop thinking, never stop learning. If you have that mentality and you homeschool your kids that way, I think they can turn out to be, extremely good people that can change the world for a better and create a better, future. But if not, don't do it. Anyways, this is just from one homeschooler that experienced that side of it. I never went to public school. I have no experience of what public school is. So I don't know the full story on that. I have many cousins, friends, etc., family members that did and have told me much about it. And I don't, I think I know a lot of people that are really smart and intelligent people that have come from the public schooling system. I don't necessarily think it's a bad or good thing. I think it's about how you perceive it and how you take it all in and what you do with the information once it's been brought to you. Um, and I see far too much nowadays that it seems like people are just like allow themselves to be indoctrinated so easily with a viewpoint, and they like refuse to listen to anything but that one viewpoint, and then um, claim themselves as like laudable, and that they should be appreciated for the fact that they refuse to think about anything but their small-minded ideas and refuse to take anything into their mind that they don't agree with or that could hamper their belief system and make them question it. And that's what destroys humanity. That's what keeps pushing us back, is people refusing to deal with truth and instead focusing on keeping their frail reality in check and not
I
just
don't
dealing
want
with
my
it.
young children.
Anyways, peace out.